And there's a lot to talk about. One of those is Ethereum 2.0 that
Yes.
has been stirring the Ethereum community for a long time. What are the things that you're personally looking forward to, and that are exciting for the space?
So for me, the big things are first of all just Ethereum 2.0 itself,
Yeah.
and getting proof of stake and especially getting sharding out there. Just a blockchain that's scalable in that way is not really something that's been done before, and I think it's going to be a really interesting experiment. Also, some of the layer 2 work that's been done recently, Plasma and in channels, I see them as being a different kind of scalability solution, and also as something that's could be really useful for people that don't want to kind of make their applications completely decentralized immediately, but they can just move them from a server to a Plasma chain and then just get some trust guarantees fairly quickly. I'm excited about also just seeing what applications people are starting to come up with. Like, it seems like it's finally gotten to the point where people are making things that people are finding useful. So, like, we've been seeing the decentralized finance stuff, but then even outside of that, there's like smartphones that are integrating Ethereum support. There's all of these like projects trying to use it for insurance, projects trying to use it for other things, and it seems like they're starting to really get users now.
And one of the things that most people have been talking about in terms of this is related to Bitcoin is that if you look at proof of work,
Yes.
right? We have an issue with 51% attack, which is a threat to a proof of work algorithm. But if you're looking at proof of stake, what are the threats to that kind of consensus algorithm?
Sure. So you can do 51% attacks against proof of stake as well, but the expectation is that it'll be more expensive, and because you'll just need more coins, but also because with a 51% attack, if you succeed, then you still keep your mining hardware. But with a 51% attack on proof of stake, it's very likely that you'll just lose the coins that you used in an attack.
Right.
Yeah, and also it's just easier to recover from.
Yeah.
Like in proof of work, for example, if some attacker actually did get more mining hardware than the rest of the network, well, they attack once, then the attack stops, but then they can attack again. They can attack a third time, and there's not really anything you can do without just changing the algorithm. Whereas with proof of stake, because attacks are expensive, you can just recover more quickly.
And for a lot of people in this space who actually sometimes say that Ethereum is centralized.
Yes.
Well, what are your responses to those kind of sentiments?
It's interesting how people trying to criticize Ethereum say it's too centralized, but then I hear people in the Ethereum community basically saying it's too decentralized now.
Yeah.
Do
you agree that it is more decentralized now?
It's definitely much more decentralized than it was even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very kind of healthy thing. It means that there is less risk that if something wrong happens to one team, then that'll break the entire project. There are also definitely kind of downsides that come with it, though. It feels like the downsides are more like there's more smoke than fire there. So people make a lot people have been arguing a lot recently, but at the same time there's just people who are doing work are still getting work done.
Yeah. And what I like about you is you don't try to get involved too much with the politics.
Yeah.
And just get to the work. But in terms of adoption of cryptocurrencies, of blockchain. Do you think we're going to end up becoming a plugin to the existing systems, or are we actually going to create a new system entirely?
Realistically, some of both, but I think, and that could be new things that people build in the blockchain community to make pure blockchain projects. But it could but it also means there's many other kind of movements, people doing new things, even just outside of the blockchain space itself. And there's plenty of people building just plenty of different kinds of new things because they care about them for completely different reasons, right? Like there's people building identity systems for refugees. There's people trying to come up with innovative like local governance solutions. There's this big long list of things. And I think especially if we can make blockchain scalable and usable enough, then those new things are going to just plug into blockchains more because, well, it's there and you can use it.
Okay, so most people say in Africa here, they have heard of what Bitcoin is. They know they use it. But Ethereum, how do you're one of the co-founders, how do you explain it?
Sure. So I think like Ethereum, I mean, first of all, it offers all of the things that Bitcoin does. There's a currency, you can use it as a currency in all the same ways, but it also offers this extra feature, which is the programmability. And programmability is useful for many things. One of them is this idea of smart contracts, which is that you can have computer programs that encode the logic of like applications that just directly control money, right? So, like even some of these sort of decentralized insurance projects that people are coming up with, like there's some logic that enforces the rules of the system, then whoever the insurer is puts money in, and you have this guarantee that it just gets paid out automatically, which is nice. And there's also the opportunity to use the blockchain for things that don't have to do with currency itself. So, like one of the biggest use cases I talk about is key revocation. So, like basically, if you have an account that you're authenticating with some cryptographic key, and then you want the ability to change the key because you're worried it got hacked or like something else happens, then you can just put that record on the blockchain, and then if you get that operation in first before the key actually gets hacked, then like, you're good, right? And when we talk about revocations, like that's an operation that you need blockchains for because you need a place to check that whether, like, if you're authenticating, you need to check that a revocation has not happened. So you would have to like check the chain and like check that this kind of event has not happened yet. And that's something the blockchains are good for.
All right, so in terms of when you started Ethereum, is this what you were thinking at the time, or how much of what exists now was exactly what your initial thought, and how much of it is it how just been a kind of an evolution of it?
So interestingly enough, the very, very earliest versions of Ethereum were basically just about trying to make more general purpose financial contracts. So like right before Ethereum, I was working in this project called Mastercoin that was focusing on financial derivatives, insurance, like crowdfunding, all these use cases a lot. And what I was trying to do at first was basically take the Mastercoin idea and kind of generalize it more. So instead of saying, here are the 10 different things you can do, you would say, here is a programming language, and whatever you can write in that programming language, you can do it. And then from there, the ideas did branch out a lot, right? Like even ENS, like using Ethereum for a domain name system.
I love ENS,
but that was more and other people figuring out that you can do that. And then there was all of this enterprise adoption that started happening. There were all of these other applications, and most of them, like I did not come up with those ideas myself. And
like ICOs, is it something that you anticipated at all? That at one point this could happen?
The Ethereum crowd sale itself was kind of an ICO, and then there were sales before that. Like there was the Mastercoin sale, which was really the first. So they were definitely a thing happening at the time, but I definitely did not expect that, like creating your own cryptocurrency and trying to raise funding for it in whatever way to just become a thing to the extent that it did.
Yeah, and you never thought, I suppose, that it could be this big, where every day and everywhere you go, people are asking me about Ethereum. Does it ever get exhausting for you?
Sometimes does, yeah.
Right. Do you like it when people make memes out of your photographs?
It depends what kind.
Right.
Like, there's definitely better ones, and then there's ones that just completely don't understand me.
Yeah. How much? In what way do you think people don't understand you in this space?
I mean, like, the people that just make memes of myself and put old Lamborghinis beside them, that just like,
Yeah.
like anyone who actually knows me would just see that as so ridiculous.
Well, what are you into, really, if you're not into Lamborghinis, as most people would think?
No, I like walking. I like reading. I like just thinking about different things. I'm fairly kind of
And like when you travel to a city like Cape Town, what are the things that you're more likely to go into and look into? Because this city is beautiful.
It is, yeah. I mean, I actually climbed up the mountain this morning.
Which one? Lion's Head, Table Mountain?
Table.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
A hike, or you took a cable car?
No, hike.
Wow, up and down.
Oh no, hike up cable car.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine.
No.
And the type of books that you're into? And what one would recommend when it comes to systems, like systems design?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've actually started reading books less lately than I used to because I found that even, like, there's very high quality blogs out there, and often enough, like, when you read a book, it feels like there's some, like, really good information, but then there's also kind of filler that's there because you have to have 200 pages.
Yes.
And like my favorite blog, I mean, Slate Star Codex is probably one of the big ones. It's really informed my philosophical thinking in a lot of ways. There's a few others, and like the articles are shorter. It's well, 2,000 or 10,000 words, but like if you add all of them up, it's basically a book. Yeah.
So if you then, you started out as a programmer, doing fun stuff, having fun, but now you're kind of evolving into a leader. How has this been for you as a transition to, like, you're a developer and now you have to become a leader, learn about different philosophies, and you're developing incentive models and different things that will affect the world in one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of that is something I've had doing for a very long time. Like even before I started Ethereum, I was writing Bitcoin Magazine for a couple of years. Starting Ethereum has definitely kind of changed my life in a lot of really unexpected ways.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest thing that I kind of was very naive about before, and I just had to learn quickly about, was just kind of the realities of working in teams and dealing with people and dealing with conflict between people. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've heard stories, but there's definitely kind of things that happened inside of Ethereum that I was not prepared for at the beginning.
Yes. And I'm considering that you were young as well at the time, right?
Yeah.
Or do you think that's not a factor?
Because
if you look, say, 3 years or just 5 years ago, I mean, how much of yourself do you think have changed in terms of thinking?
Definitely quite a lot.
So, lastly, what's your position when it comes to Bitcoin, SV, and what's happening in the space? BSV being delisted from Binance, and the noise that Craig Wright is creating.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously BSV is a complete scam, but like the delisting from Binance, that was interesting. Like there's arguments in favor of it, but then there's also arguments that, like, this is an exchange that's like wielding a lot of centralized power.
Yeah.
But like realistically, like Binance as an exchange has a lot of power and it's wielding it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's like they've asked for big listing fees. They influence which coins win and lose by just choosing like what trading pairs they have. And so like it's weird to kind of criticize like that one decision without looking at all their others.
Yes.
So I think like the more long-term thing is, I mean, like I'm sure you've heard my kind of comment last year about wanting centralized exchanges to burn in hell as much as possible.
Yeah.
I do really want decentralized exchanges to succeed and at least kind of offer enough of a level of service that tokens can exist and do well, like like regardless of what centralized exchanges do.
So that is a very good point. I would need you to explain at what level do you consider an exchange decentralized, what it means to you to be a decentralized exchange,
Yeah.
and also have you had any inputs from the government, kind of trying to talk to you in terms of how they can go about this?
Sure. So there's different levels of decentralization, right? So the kind of lowest level you can get to is an exchange being non-custodial.
Yeah.
So what that means is that it's still a centralized exchange, but it uses smart contracts in some way, possibly Plasma or something similar, to have the property that even if the exchange gets hacked or the exchange becomes malicious, you can still get your money out. And that's something that I think is valuable by itself, because if you look at cryptocurrency exchanges and thefts from cryptocurrency exchanges, they're big. Like Mt. Gox lost 500 million. Some exchanges in Korea lost a couple hundred million over the last year, and most of those losses are cryptocurrency, right? Because if you steal fiat, like it's more regulated, it's just easier to get it back, and it's easier to catch people.
Yeah.
But then, so with cryptocurrency, like on the one hand, it's more kind of slippery because it's less regulated in this way, but on the other hand, because it's cryptographic, you have the ability to build these tools, so you don't need to trust people to hold it for you. And so, like with custodial exchanges, I do think that you can really reduce the risk of these sort of really big thefts. And I hope that we can at least kind of get to a world where if you build an exchange, you just build it that way by default, because you're just scared of like your other people like wanting your head cut off if you get hacked.
Yeah.
Like if you get to the point where the default is that you want to make things trustless, then that would be a big step. But then, so that's the first level, right? The second level is if you want an exchange where you don't rely on a central party, even for even to kind of exist and be online, right? So then there is sort of different levels of that. So one of them is this kind of relayer approach that I think like 0x and some others are taking, where you have, it's still kind of trustless, you have relayers, but then it's kind of federated, you try to make an open market of them. And then the approach that's like way at the top is kind of completely sort of not central party dependent. And especially like the highest of the peak is if the whole thing is just a smart contract, right? So the reason I really like Uniswap and I keep kind of pumping Uniswap everywhere I go is because, like, first of all, it really is completely decentralized in that way. It just is a contract, and like you can just go and use it, and it's there, and like, nothing can take it away. But also, like, despite that, it manages to be extremely easy to use. Like, it's probably like 10 to 100 times easier to use than other exchanges, because you just go to a website, log in with MetaMask, click, and you're done. And I'm really happy that we have that within at least the Ethereum blockchain itself. But I think now the challenge is that there's more blockchains popping up, and so it would be nice if we could have high quality, more decentralized exchanges that can handle multiple blockchains. And I think we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So, for example, I was really impressed by one thing Kyber did, which is they managed to make a apparently completely trustless bridge between Ethereum and EOS. And like it's completely trustless, so they have like a light client of EOS inside of Ethereum and a light client of Ethereum inside of EOS, and like they talk to each other. So I thought that was just like really amazing. It's a lot of technical skill in their team, and that's like you actually can just build that, and once it's there, anyone can use it.
Did you ever thought of before I get to my second part of the question? But did you ever thought of becoming anonymous like Satoshi at the beginning of Ethereum at all?
I felt like it was too late. Like the problem is that I had already done this Bitcoin magazine for 2 years, and there was just so much information about like my writing style and all of these things. I mean, like I could try dodging that by like writing all of my posts in French and like hoping that they won't catch me that way. But
And so, yeah, the second part of the question was, do you get approached by governments in one way or another
Yes.
to try for them to understand how to go about it? And
Yeah.
what do you think they're at or their understanding of this is? And also, a lot of people like to ask, can this be stopped by governments? Say we're banning this, now it's over.
Yeah, I've definitely talked to quite a few governments, and the ones in Asia actually seem to be the ones that kind of most actively reach out and want to talk to me.
Yeah.
And they're definitely interested in the technology. I mean, they're definitely also concerned about money laundering things like exchange thefts and other things. And there's definitely ways that we can help solve problems that they care about. Like even just coming up with like trust minimized exchanges and like better alternatives to the kind of extremely centralized versions of ICOs that we have today. I think like I've talked to them about things and they're definitely excited to see improvements if they can be actually made to work. There's been interest in this concept of security token offerings recently.
Yeah.
So, there's this conference in Taiwan a while back, and they're apparently planning to release some regulation around this, I think in June, which is really interesting. And the thing that interests me there is that, first of all, it's just more bridges between kind of the blockchain world and the real world.
Yeah.
And it's done in this way that integrates blockchain layers and legal layers so that you have you can basically have things happen on a blockchain that actually just directly become legally binding.
Yeah.
And you can then think about using this to even control, just run entire organizations and companies, which I think that part's really interesting. And then just using blockchains to give people more access to different kinds of assets is also interesting.
Can this be banned by governments and this be it's over? We ban it.
I think
Because that's what a lot of people say. Mostly who are not really in this space, they'll be like, you know what? I don't really like that space or even just to invest in it because I feel like government will just come out one day and say, it's over, guys. Okay.
I think it would definitely be very difficult to ban completely. There's plenty of things that plenty of governments would like to see shut down, even more than cryptocurrency. Even just the Tor network is one of them, and yet it's been apparently successfully blocked in some countries, but it's generally still running. But there are if they want to crack down, you don't want to go to the other extreme and say there's nothing they can do to control it at all, because if they want to crack down, the simplest thing that they can do is they could just ban all of the exchanges.
Yeah.
And then now, it's you turn it into this thing where people that really wants to get into it can still get into it, but it just becomes 10 times harder to have anything get mass market adoption.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it's definitely we definitely do need to try our best to prevent that kind of outcome from taking place, and that does also mean talking to governments and listening to their concerns and seeing if there's some way that we can help solve them.
Yeah.
And if they do try to go after it harder, I think banning exchanges is the first, and it's just the first and simplest thing that they can do, and it's definitely still an untested assumption that the crypto space can maintain kind of more than a very small user base under those conditions.
Yes.
And if it can, then we'll see it, but it's still it's more untested than people realize.
So myself, being based in Africa, one of the things that I'm really excited that blockchain or say cryptocurrency has changed directly to me is peer-to-peer finance has changed a lot of things, because I'm on the ground. I do kind of a retail Bitcoin transactions. And it has changed people in a great way, because I know people who can work now on the internet and get paid with cryptocurrencies very easily. They can buy things online very easy, and remittances is it's not a big issue for people that are really into and they know about Bitcoin. And here, the use case is not about buy and hodl kind of thing. People buy Bitcoin to actually use it.
Right.
You see,
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of potential that could come out of smart contracts. Things like Ethereum, they allowed me personally and other people, to invest into global markets, which that was unheard of before. I wonder, from your point of view, what has been one of the most fulfilling things that you have seen that Ethereum has been able to do that you're happy with?
Yeah, and I think making kind of international commerce easier is a really big one.
Yeah.
And it's even something that benefits the Ethereum Foundation directly, right? Because we have contractors in more than 10 countries, and we do really benefit from the ability to just pay people in Ether or in some cases even die instead of having to just figure out banking details of every single place and person that we want to try to deal with. It's just even just something like getting reimbursed for a flight. If you just compare the banking process versus cryptocurrency, it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
But then that's also just it's definitely good that we're seeing these kind of applications that go beyond just payments that people are starting to come up with. So insurance is one of those that I'm interested in, because it's it's definitely a market that's very inefficient in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's if you look at the history of insurance, right, 200 years ago, it was basically clubs of people that just got together and agreed to pay each other's expenses if one of their ships got flooded.
Yes.
And that from there we've moved to this more centralized model, and it would be interesting to see applications based on blockchains that can try different kinds of models out. And there are people that are trying. So for example, there's Hurricane Guard that's doing hurricane natural disaster insurance in Puerto Rico. There's the crop insurance in Sri Lanka and a couple of others.
Yeah.
So it's definitely really good to see people trying, though I'm still also wants to it seems like we're getting to the point where these things can have gets to really start benefiting a lot of people, but it still feels like it's maybe just a bit away from that.
On all the travels you've been to, what is the most hilarious thing you've ever done?
Most hilarious thing I've ever done. The most recent one that comes to mind is taking a picture beside that banner from Justin Sun.
And with Ethereum masternodes,
Yes.
is it 30 Ethereum or 32 Ethereum? There's kind of
Yeah, right now the goal is 32.
32. Okay, that is fair, because I remember a couple of years ago we used to hear about 1,500 or so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so what happened there is we switched, the approach we did before was to try to do things on the existing Ethereum 1 chain, and that had a lot of overhead, and there were a lot of optimizations that we couldn't use.
Yeah.
So the biggest one was just BLS aggregation, and then the overhead is just about Merkle trees and storage and all of those things. And now we're building this more kind of custom and optimized chain for the purpose, and so the load of handling validators is just much smaller than it was before. So yeah, and we had from the numbers that we've seen with test nets, right? The theoretical maximum number of validators that you can support is about 4 million, because we're predicting that all of this will get added when the ETH supply is somewhere around 110 or 120 million divided by 32. You have about less than 4 million. So with 4 million validators, I think a couple of weeks ago the result was that you can validate an average block in 1.5 seconds and the worst possible case block in 12 seconds. Now, which is still not the best, because the block time is 6 seconds, but they're just that's the worst possible case where everything bad is happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're just a few small optimizations away from it working. So it's I'm definitely really looking forward to just larger scale testnets being tried.
Yeah.
And I'm also looking forward to testnets where more just regular people can try out participating in the staking experience.
Yes.
So, like, we want staking to be fairly and widely distributed for lots of people to have the opportunity to participate, and we'll get to see like exactly how easy it is to run a node and stay on the network.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you really have a very simple, because I run nodes, I love master nodes, but the problem is the setup is very difficult for the average guy.
Yep.
And I get so many guys that are maybe they've been scammed in some mining operations or
Right.
something, and then they really want to get into master nodes, but the setup is just too difficult.
Right. Yep.
So if it would just be a matter of load up your tokens,
Yep,
1,
click,
2, 3, and
send,
click, it's
done.
up. Yeah, that would be
that's
awesome.
what we're going for. One big
Yeah.
thing that I kind of care about that I want more people to focus on is like wallet security.
Yeah.
Because like the simplest kind of wallet where you just have one key, and if you lose your key or if your key gets stolen, you're screwed. Like that's just so terrible for people.
Yeah.
And honestly, even hardware wallets are like not really the best.
Nope.
Like I think if you want something secure enough to store large amounts of assets, and then especially later on like people's identities, then you need something that's like multi-factor in some way. You need something that's kind of got more layers of security behind it.
How do you secure yourself from, say, in a worst occasion, in the worst occasion, you have to die, and then what happens to your cryptocurrency? Because to me, I've asked this question to David Auburn, Roger Ver, a couple of other guys, and nobody really has given me a solid answer of what the custodial side of things.
For me, I basically what I did was I on my cold wallet laptop calculated two numbers that add up to my private key, and I just gave those two numbers to two different friends.
And you give those two numbers to different friends.
Yes.
So, but that is a kind of a very personal approach, which is great. But then, for someone who don't have those circumstances, shouldn't be there like a smart contract that looks into these things, and or if you create a wallet, I would think that every wallet should have a solution to this baked in one way or another.
Yeah. So the thing with a smart contract, right, is that it still has to have something as input, and so. Like the question of like is this you isn't really something that's kind of mathematically definable.
Yeah.
It's something like you can try to represent that through something you have or some number that you know. But if you want something more secure than that, then you would either have to rely on kind of partial centralization. So one example of this would be like you have a hardware wallet, a password, and that's two factors, but then a third factor might be some custodian vault company. And if you lose one of your factors, you can talk to them, like do KYC with them, and then they help you recover it. But then like if they end up not being trustworthy, then the two things that you have together could get you your wallet back. So things like that are good approaches. I'm generally a fan of this kind of, if you have some number of trusted friends, then set it up so that kind of the majority of them can kind of recover your key back. Like it doesn't need to be 2; it can even be like 5 out of 10 or something.
Yes.
And even in places where trusted institutions don't exist, like people do have relationships that they can trust a lot of the time, and so trying to take advantage of that, I think, is a good choice.
From a probability point of view, though, even 2 friends are really not enough, because what happens if the fatal happens with the 2, including yourself, the wallet holder?
Yeah,
that is
and
everything.
I think from like something like for me personally, I'm also afraid of like technical risk, and so like my cold wallet laptop is using Pi Ethereum, which is code I wrote myself. So like obviously most people can't do that, but it's still something like we do need to put more effort into just writing code that makes it easier for people to do this, and making it easier to just like set up your security in this way, and then you'd have your the code itself needs to be audited and probably formally verified a couple of times. So we just needs to put the effort into making this working. So the other reason I'm interested in this is that I think if we have solutions that work well enough for holding cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
which is a market where like there's very big incentives to be secure and there's also very big incentives to try to break security, then that's something that could be used in other places as well.
Yeah.
So like you could even imagine an Ethereum account being used to like sign into internet services. And then you could have an identity where you don't need your identity to be controlled by like Google or Facebook or Twitter.
Right. Oh yeah, that is good.
Yeah.
That is good. And in terms of the future of Ethereum, you think it's still going to be involved? And what do you think about issues like what happened with the Litecoin Foundation, where the founder just sold off and exited a little bit?
I mean, I'm definitely not planning to sell everything off and exit anytime soon.
Okay.
But at the same time, right, like the Ethereum community should not need to kind of trust me for Ethereum to continue existing.
Yes.
And I think one of the good news over the last year is that there's been like people say I've stepped back. I don't think I have. Like it's more been all of these other people that have stepped up. Right? Like on the research team, like Danny, Justin, Xiaowei, and more people have done a really good job on the Ethereum 2.0 spec. Like Alexei has been doing a really good job on kind of leading the ETH 1.x efforts. The ETH 2.0 developer companies, they're just really good teams, all by great companies all by themselves. So I think like it's not just about me, right? Like if you're, I guess I've said on Reddit recently, like if you're making a bet on the Ethereum ecosystem, it's these kind of silent armies that you're betting on, and they're definitely bigger than it might seem on Twitter.
Right. If you had to build a dApp right now, not on Ethereum, what blockchain will you build it on?
I mean, Ethereum Classic, because it's the most similar to Ethereum.
And without Ethereum Classic?
Depends what kind of dApp. So like if I was just doing payments, then I would probably, I like Zcash the most because they've been doing really good work on privacy.
Yeah.
For a just smart contract chain, I mean, none of the ones that exist currently really satisfy me. I mean, like I think like Dfinity is interesting, and there's other interesting smart contract chains that are coming out soon.
And from the philosophical point of view, what do you think? The issue of say privacy in the blockchain space, or just the ability to allow people to trade without intermediaries, being perceived as a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean. And there's definitely.
What's your take with that? Just like having kind of an unregulated market.
Yeah, there's definitely people that, a lot of people that say that. I think my answer would be that first of all, blockchain technology itself just also provides kind of different ways of solving those same problems, right? So like even like the example with exchange hacks, like on the one hand the coins are more slippery, but on the other, because you can just steal them anonymously, but on the other hand you have more tools to create structures that make it more difficult for people to steal them.
Yes.
And for more privacy preserving solutions do solve problems that people really care about. Like there's been this big movement against centralized data collection recently with things like the GDPR and people thinking about privacy legislation in other places. So there's definitely this very positive side to privacy and kind of quote self-sovereignty. And I also think that if you zoom out and look at the bigger world, right, there's the world is not kind of becoming invisible, right? Like there's more information just visible through the existing internet than there even was 20 years ago. There's the amount of things that you can see with all the surveillance cameras that are around, and there's just so much that was not even imaginable 20 years ago. And especially with AI being able to just spot where someone is, a big parts of just where people are going around every day. Yeah. So I think I almost hope privacy on the internet and on blockchains can be a counterbalance to that.
Yes, that is a very good point. Cool, man. Thank you so much. I do appreciate